Back in high school, my favorite movie was Blood Diamond. And for those who haven't seen it, Leonardo DiCaprio is a smuggler in modern-day Sierra Leone. The country is in a constant state of war between political factions who take turns selling off the country's natural resources to European industrialists. Leo is tasked with finding and extraditing a rare blood red diamond out of the country. It's held by a miner, Solomon Vandy, who's on the run against gangs of corporate and political players, who are exposed to be one and the same, money-fueled warlords. The movie traces how diamonds come to arrive on a woman's finger, and the chain of lives that are ruined in the process. After watching, you immediately walk away with a pit in your stomach. You realize the diamond industry is a product of slavery, war, and oppression. The movie was entertaining, but also rocked me to my core as a teenager who wanted to have a diamond-pierced ear like his favorite rock stars.
Are you more Justin Timberlake or Tom DeLonge?
Please don't judge me. Still to this day, the movie made both the romantic pastime of proposing to someone as well as the MTV rich flexing feel completely hollow. A lot has changed in the diamond industry since this movie came out, and for the better, with the rise of lab-grown diamonds. If you haven't gotten down on one knee lately, lab diamonds are just what the name implies. They're made by man in a controlled environment using science.
Yes, science!
Scientists start with pure carbon, usually from methane gas or graphite, and use heat, pressure, or plasma to free individual carbon atoms. Those atoms attach to a small diamond, seed, and grow layer by layer into a real diamond, the same way that crystals form in nature, just much faster and under controlled conditions. But I'm not a scientist, nor do I play one on TV. I'm a business model nerd, and the story of the diamond industry is one that makes a CFO and business fan drool. Monopolies, unit economics, pricing, defensive marketing, and venture dollars all wrapped into one. That's why it makes for the perfect topic to explore. This is a CFO Explains the Diamond Industry.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Every famous diamond in the world is represented in this case. They are worth many millions of dollars, and trails of blood, romance, and adventure follow the history of each gem.
Diamonds have been around, well, since forever.
Diamonds are forever, forever, forever.
But what they symbolize and how they exchange hands has changed throughout the centuries. The earliest known diamonds date back to 4th century India. While today we know diamonds as products of mines, they were originally found in riverbeds. People would luck upon them while fishing or washing their clothes in the local tributary. Supply was naturally capped by manual extraction and lack of technology. There was no global market or pricing system, which also meant there were no intermediaries to profit.
This is good because, as we know from our previous episodes, you can't cut out the middleman.
Back then, diamonds were prized as symbols of power and divinity. They weren't everyday wear. They were unpolished, somewhat shiny, I guess, and definitely craggly rocks. They were more religious symbols than an economic good or a way to flex on other people. It wasn't until the medieval period where diamonds began to take the form of portable wealth. European merchants developed some primitive cutting techniques which made them look a lot better. And as history has shown, leave it to Europeans with boats to figure out some trade routes to capitalize on the opportunity.
Yeah, I feel like Europeans with boats are responsible for at least like 60% of world history, and not always in a good way.
In this era, diamonds first became a store of value for the elite, most of which were shipped over from India. They could be easily hidden and transported and function like pre-modern bearer assets. So we've gone from spiritual symbols to financial instruments reserved for the really rich people. And then, the first big supply shock came in the 1700s in Brazil. Massive diamond deposits were found in the earth, giving way to the mining industry, which Portugal nationalized almost immediately. India's century-long riverbed monopoly collapsed as the market shifted from ultra-rare to still kind of rare, but also available if you had the money and knew the right people. As a result, it was the first time that oversupply risk appeared. Then, in the mid-1800s, South Africa stumbled upon their own diamond deposits and took manual extraction from mines to the next level. The Brazilian and Portuguese industries were still rudimentary in terms of mining techniques, and the supply chain was incredibly fragmented. And this is where the beer shows up.
I'm gonna guess that this isn't the fun kind of beer that makes the mountains blue when it's cold.
I'm more of a Miller Lite guy myself. Founded by Cecil Rhodes, a British-born imperialist, the company verticalized the supply chain and consolidated claims throughout South Africa, eliminating competitors in the process.
This headgear tops the Wesselton mine shaft, which bores 1,600 feet deep into the diamond-rich earth.
Rhodes's core insight was actually more financial than industrial. While everyone was obsessed with finding better ways to get diamonds out of the ground faster, he realized they were dealing with an economic problem if they were successful in digging. Assuming better mining, the key to the diamond industry was no longer finding more diamonds, but selling them without causing the price to cave in on itself. The reality was unit economics got worse the more you succeeded in pulling these things out of the earth. Kind of a catch-22. Well, the racist opportunist he was, I had to call that out before giving this guy too much credit, because he had pretty deplorable views hinged on white supremacy. Rhodes realized that unless production was centralized, price discipline would be impossible. You'd have a sprint to the bottom.
I'm sure every founder who's had a competitor undercut their pricing on AWS knows exactly what this feels like.
Very true, Ben. And Rhodes in many ways was the first venture-backed miner. Most miners were self-funded at the time, living hand-to-mouth, and selling as soon as they found something. They were very cash flow dependent. Rhodes saw that he who could wait the longest to sell could control the market. So he raised capital from London using a mix of debt and equity. That equity came from none other than the Rothschild dynasty.
Shouldn't they call them the Roth's children?
Much like Silicon Valley Bank of our times, the Rothschild was not a retail bank. It did not lend like a commercial lender. They were a form of flexible institutional capital with long-term time horizons. Between 1880 and 1888, Rhodes used this capital to go on a buying spree, consolidating claims and performing a PE-like roll-up of family-owned claims. It was the definition of inorganic growth. What he observed were the inefficiencies of thousands of individual claims paired with the price volatility, which was causing diamonds to trade at times like a bad commodity. He set out to separate ownership and distribution and then to take a meaningful stake in each. Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. So here's a pattern I keep running into when I talk to finance leaders at fast-growing companies. You've outgrown the spreadsheets. You've probably outgrown your billing tools built in RevRec, but you're not quite at the point where you can throw a 20-person team at the problem either. That's exactly the danger zone RightRev owns. RightRev is revenue recognition done right. It handles the messy stuff like high-volume subscriptions, usage-based contracts, and mid-contract upgrades. The things that break your ERP and the billing platform bolt-ons. Here's the thing though, your sales team isn't slowing down for you. They're closing ramp deals, usage commitments, and mid-quarter upgrades. And the longer you wait to fix the engine, the further behind you fall. So stop scrambling at month end and stitching together allocations across 3, 4, 5 spreadsheets to just have the numbers ready. Well, that's it. That's the whole pitch. CFOs tell me it's like a glow up for the revenue books. That sounds like where you are right now. RightRev is worth the look. Head to rightrev.com/CJ. That's rightrev.com/CJ. Check them out. I got news for you. The ERP category is finally getting disrupted. And if you haven't heard of Rillet yet, please pay attention. It's the AI native ERP built specifically to replace NetSuite, and it's already won over hundreds of finance teams. Their mission is to make the zero-day close a reality, and they're actually doing it. We're talking teams closing the books at 1:35 p.m. on the first day of the month. Companies like Windsurf, Mercor, and hundreds of others run their entire finance stack on Rillet. Revenue recognition, close management, multi-entity, native Stripe and Salesforce integrations. Woo! Everything a scaling company needs. They've got 5.0 stars on G2. They're backed by A16Z and Sequoia, heard of them, and CPA-led implementations that get you live in 45 days. That is simply unheard of in the ERP space. If your books aren't running as fast as your business, check out Rillet. Book a demo at rillet.com/CJ. That is RILLET.com/CJ. That's me. Scaling a tech company is thrilling. It's also really, really messy. Just ask anyone who's done it, or anyone who's tried. Better yet, ask EY. They've seen startups at their best, and in their most fragile moments. EY knows you don't start a company to burn cycles on regulatory hoops, discounted cash flows, or the fine print of SEC Form S1. Although you probably do know I love myself a good S1 if you've listened to or read my stuff long enough. You can't ignore these things. That's how risk compounds. Kind of like negative interest. What you can do is work with EY from day one. They'll help you get it right early and often, so you can stay in builder mode and keep the trains running on time. EY, shape the future with confidence. Learn more at ey.com/techstartups. That is ey.com/techstartups. The creation here was the Central Selling Organization, or CSO, an arm of De Beers arguably more important than the mining group itself. The CSO was not some invisible cartel, it was a highly methodical operating system for diamonds. It covered all diamonds that came from De Beers mines, as well as third-party producers, funneling them to a centralized warehouse. This avoided any diamonds being sold at the mine and forced them into a centralized inventory pool. The producers gave up pricing control over market timing and pricing in the process. It's kind of like forcing every SaaS vendor to route bookings through one centrally run deal desk. And from there, diamonds are sorted into thousands of categories based on size, shape, color, clarity, and quality. This eliminated one-off bargaining and standardized pricing inputs, and it destroyed any buying arbitrage to cherry-pick diamonds. Now here's where it gets next level. It's called the site system. These were invite-only auctions held a max of 10 times per year, where 100 to 150 site holders were approved for the right to buy. That's right, you had to get approved for the right to give them your money.
Kind of feels like the equivalent of trying to get an invite to the annual Allen & Company Sun Valley Conference, or, I don't know, trying to purchase real estate in Aspen.
Each buyer was shown a sealed box of diamonds. The box composition, which they couldn't see, was predetermined. And guess what? The pricing was fixed, and there was zero negotiation. Take it or leave it. And if you didn't accept the box, you lost access to future auctions. So what did the CSO do with all the other diamonds? They stockpiled them, sometimes multiple years' worth of global demand. And it worked because, unlike crops, diamonds do not degrade and are not all that big to store. They're the perfect commodity to keep hidden away in a vault somewhere below the surface.
How the hell did they pull all this off? I mean, how did they get buy-in? How did their economic interests trump all the others?
Well, because remember, De Beers was backed by big capital. They took advantage of the fact that most producers needed short-term cash. They couldn't house the inventory themselves, and they couldn't survive multi-year downturns. De Beers had that London money and could sit on inventory indefinitely. And if you were brave enough to sell around them, they would temporarily flood your local market, undercut you, and then retighten supply once you died off.
Sounds kind of like Walmart destroying the general store in small towns.
I'm going out of business.
Why, Mr. Farkle?
I can't compete with Walmart's low prices.
Carmen, stop it!
By mid-20th century, 80% to 90% of global rough diamonds flowed through the CSO. Now, it's important to point out there's actually way more diamonds in the world than gold. In fact, scientists estimate that a quadrillion tons of diamonds exist deep below the Earth's surface in cratonic roots.
I didn't even know you could have a quadrillion of something.
And I didn't know what a cratonic root was until today. Total inaccessible gold reserves deep in the Earth, estimated at a much lower 400,000 tons. Now, not all that is extractable, given it's too far below the Earth's surface, but if we were to come up with an estimate in terms of how much we could get our hands on, the ratio of diamonds to gold would be a stunning 180 to 1.
Okay, so why do people still want diamonds so much if they're so common?
This is where the spin comes in. In 1938, De Beers hired marketing firm N.W. Ayer to solve a demand problem that arose post the Great Depression. At that time, engagement rings were not culturally mandatory. Ayer employed famed Sultan of Spin Edward Bernays, whose influence permeated throughout the firm. He's famous for the Torches of Freedom campaign, which encouraged women to rip cigarettes. He also made ivory soap a household need, and he increased bacon sales via the breakfast table. Name a better marketer. I'll wait.
Someone pass the Heinz. We got a real-life Don Draper on our hands.
Many say that Mad Men was actually based on Edward Bernays. While Bernays didn't directly work on the De Beers account, the firm applied the same frameworks to diamonds, which encouraged selling to an identity and playing into social expectations rather than just trying to sell a product. Internal documents from the PR firm at the time cite the goal of strengthening the tradition of the engagement ring and making diamonds a psychological necessity. This took the form of women pressuring their men to buy them a diamond ring.
That diamond is symbolic of a pledge that will be made this year by nearly 1.5 million couples.
To do that, they leaned heavily into Hollywood movies, placing large rings on fingers of the era's most famous actresses at the time. And they used celebrities to normalize the buying behavior in flashy newspaper ads. Then in 1947 came the famed campaign, "A Diamond is Forever." It was brilliant because it implied no resale, no secondary market, and no pricing comparisons. And it went so far as to tell men that they should spend 3x their monthly paycheck on one.
Sheesh, how much was rent back then? Like $2 a month?
Before the campaign, diamonds were optional with varying sizes and undefined spending bands. Afterwards, they were expected and anchored to a specific pricing mechanism. They successfully engineered demand. And to tie this back to the CSO, supply was already controlled. Prices were already set. Together, they formed a closed economic loop. This model reigned supreme for more than 75 years.
All right, so diamonds started in India. They had a stopover in Africa. There were some logistic shenanigans, and then movie stars started popularizing them in more recent history. So where's the next frontier?
Well, we've come full circle as India has become one of the largest producers of lab-grown diamonds. Lab-grown diamonds were first created in 1954 for industrial use because they're extremely strong and can cut through stuff, I guess. They're used in industrial cutting, grinding, and drilling tools, as well as semiconductor manufacturing, laser technology, and specialized medical equipment. But they only became a real threat to the jewelry market after tech advances in the 2010s made large, high-quality stones cheaper and more scalable. 15 years later, lab-grown diamonds now account for 20% of total diamond purchases in the US and 50% of engagement ring purchases worldwide. You can get a lab-grown diamond for as low as 25% of an earth-grown one. To put that into perspective, someone who has $25,000 to spend now has the purchasing power of a $100,000 diamond for their partner. That's a massive jump.
Yeah, let's forget Bitcoin. Invest in lab diamonds, people.
In a half-hearted attempt to stay relevant, industry analysts report that mined diamonds since 2022 have dropped in price by 34%, which is a steep fall, yet still multiples off the price of a lab-grown diamond. The math still isn't mathing when you're buying an engagement ring. For context, natural diamonds often sold at 6 to 8x their mine gate value once they reach retail, driven less by manufacturing costs, which only account for 2 price multiple turns, and more by controlled supply and price opacity. As a result, De Beers is bleeding. In early 2025, De Beers disclosed a $2.9 billion impairment. That means a write-off on the value of the diamond business. This was the second major write-down in consecutive years, following a $1.6 billion impairment charge in 2024. The company reported an operating loss of $3.1 billion in 2024, going into the red after clinging to an operating profit of just $283 million in 2023. So to cut to the chase, the company now has an enterprise value of around $4 billion, which has fallen dramatically from around $13 billion in 2011 when 40% of the firm was purchased. This represents a 60 to 70% decline in valuation since the peak, or since when lab-grown diamonds showed up. Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. One more thing about SpendHound. Teams using SpendHound reduce software spend by up to 30%. Here's how that actually happens. First, you get the data. Real pricing benchmarks from over 1,000 companies across 10,000 SaaS and AI vendors. When a renewal comes up, you know what fair pricing is and what you should be pushing for. But knowing the number and getting the number are two different things. SpendHound also includes on-demand procurement specialists who help with negotiation strategy, contract review, and renewal emails. You stop overpaying for the tools you need. You cut redundant tools before they renew. And you negotiate from a position of strength now that you have both the market data and expert support behind you. SpendHound is built by the team behind Yipit Data. It's rated #1 on G2 in SaaS spend management. And did we mention it's free forever for SMB? When we say free, we actually mean it. You can keep all the savings. Plus, it's only $10,000 per year for enterprise with $150,000 in savings guaranteed. There's a reason we're growing more than 100% year over year. Do you want to stop overspending on SaaS? And go to spendhound.com/CJ. Zero risk, guaranteed savings. That's spendhound.com/CJ. Most finance teams aren't underperforming. They're actually under-equipped. The problem isn't the people, it's what they're being asked to do. Because there are two kinds of finance work. The kind that moves the business forward and the kind that just keeps it from falling flat on its face. And too many finance teams are buried in the second kind, and they call it a good week when they just get through it. Expense reports that take longer than the trips they cover, spend policies living in PDFs that no one reads, a 3-day approval process for a $40 receipt. That's a lot of burritos, but not worth it. Month-end close that stretches into weeks. These aren't edge cases, they're the default state of finance at most growing companies. And the cost isn't just the time, it's what your best people aren't doing while they're buried in the wrong work. You become what you spend on, and right now, too many finance teams are spending on maintenance instead of momentum. And that is why I use Brex, agentic finance that captures receipts automatically, enforces policy before the spend happens, and closes your books in minutes rather than weeks. So your finance team stops spending on maintenance and starts spending on momentum. 35,000 companies like OpenAI, Coinbase, Anthropic, and DoorDash already run on Brex because high-density talent deserves some high-leverage systems. It's time to get Brex AF. Can't believe they let me say that. Learn more at brex.com/metrics. That is brex.com/metrics. I've seen a lot of FP&A tools, and Aleph is one of the few that gave me that aha moment within minutes. I remember watching their founder, shout out to Albert, connect my NetSuite data and build me a full P&L live in minutes. Aleph is now trusted by hundreds of leading companies. I've had the CFOs from Turo, 8Sleep, Zapier, and more on the pod, and every one of them is a huge advocate. I also just published my second annual CFO Tech Stack report, and Aleph has been on the podium both years, including a #1 finish in the $50 to $100 million segment this year. Instead of being just another planning tool, they built a real enterprise-grade data foundation for finance, implemented at startup speed with AI-native workflows woven into its DNA. All your systems, ERP, CRM, HRIS, ATS, product usage, and more, powering one clean, governed data layer that finance can actually trust. And with AI moving as fast as it is, they're pushing even further. MCP, custom AI chatbots, AI-powered variance analysis, and the list keeps growing. Try it with your own data at getaleph.com/run. That is GETALEPH.com/run. Tell them CJ sent you.
All right, Mr. Numbers Man, what can we learn from the history of diamonds? What do people have to take away from this?
First, rollups are powered by capital, not creativity or style points. Love them or hate them, rollups are a tale as old as time. Private equity firms are rolling up everything from HVAC providers to dental offices today, just like De Beers did in the late 1800s using long-duration capital from the Rothschild. Having patient institutional capital allowed Rhodes to buy distressed operators, survive downturns, and consolidate when others are forced sellers.
Capital structure determines who gets to play offense when markets fragment.
Right you are. Second, not all parts of the value chain are created equal. De Beers didn't win by controlling mining alone, it won by controlling distribution. While it consolidated roughly 50% of mining and production, it controlled closer to 85% of distribution through ownership and contractual leverage via the CSO. And roughly 75% of the industry's markup lived downstream, not at the point of extraction.
The CSO was worth more than the mines ever were.
Much like Amazon, you want to own the last mile. Owning production without controlling distribution fails to optimize for margin. Third, scarcity backed by capital looks permanent until it isn't. Diamonds felt scarce not because they were impossible to produce, but because capital and coordination enforced scarcity for decades. It raises a fair question about modern markets like AI chips, where scarcity today is driven by who controls manufacturing capacity and distribution, rather than by anything fundamentally impossible to make. There are a quadrillion tons of diamonds below the Earth's surface. Capital and coordination kept the lid on for a century. When lab diamonds made that visible, the whole thing unraveled in about a decade. The most dangerous assumption is mistaking capital enforced scarcity for permanent scarcity.
There's no such thing as a permanent champ.
In diamonds and in boxing. Fourth, price opacity is a moat until technology forces transparency. De Beers economics relied on the fact that diamonds had no transparent market price. There was no ticker, no spot market consumers, no easy comparables. The CSO could administer prices because buyers couldn't easily benchmark what fair value was, and resale was culturally discouraged. Remember, a diamond is forever. If your pricing power depends on customers not being able to compare you, assume that, well, marketplaces, AI agents, usage-based benchmarks, and procurement platforms will eventually make you comparable. And when pricing becomes transparent, brand premium becomes the only defense.
So in other words, opacity is a temporary moat. Build a real one before it disappears.
Fifth, in 1938, diamonds were optional. By 1950, they were mandatory. Ayer placed rocks on the fingers of Hollywood's biggest actresses, seeded newspaper ads with celebrities, and then told men that 3 months' salary was the appropriate spend. Before the campaign, ring size varied and budgets were undefined. Afterwards, there was only one acceptable answer. That's what we call demand engineering, and it held for 70 years. The narrative moat was just as important as the supply moat. If you can make your product a cultural expectation rather than a purchase decision, pricing becomes a secondary consideration and sometimes a coveted feature.
Meaning people will actually pay more because everyone else is paying that much. I mean, the price becomes part of the signal. It's wild.
It's crazy. The price becomes part of the product itself. It's what you're buying. 6, the real product was never the diamond. It was risk smoothing. The CSO didn't just sell diamonds, it sold stability. Producers got predictable monetization, so fewer price crashes. Site holders got predictable supply, which meant fewer shortages. And the whole system avoided panic cycles, which is good for everyone. De Beers function like a market maker and insurer, absorbing volatility through stockpiles and controlled release. In retrospect, the companies with durable pricing power often aren't the ones with the best product. They're the ones that reduce volatility for customers, make costs predictable, and turn uncertainty into something they manage better than anyone else.
This is basically the whole game in software right now. I mean, the product is almost secondary. It's really all about who removes the most friction and unpredictability from their customer's life. They're going to be the ones that win.
This is why financial primitives win in tech and software. I'm talking about predictable billing, guaranteed capacity, service level agreements, embedded financing, long-term contracts, and usage smoothing and commitment floors. If you can make your customer's world more predictable, you can charge more and churn less, even in competitive markets. So I started this journey with Blood Diamond because the ending stuck with me. Leo dies on a hillside with nothing, but he knows he did the right thing. Solomon, the fisherman who was enslaved and forced to dig, walks away with his family, a ton of money, and a seat at the table where the industry was finally forced to reckon with what it had built. The whole De Beers story follows a similar arc, except for the doing the right thing piece. The company is fading after multiple centuries of capital, coordination, and a cute tagline that told men how much to spend. Eventually, they couldn't hold the secondary market down anymore. No cultural norm is strong enough to survive a 75% price discount.
Exactly. Danny Archer died on that hillside so you could buy a lab diamond, so you better honor his sacrifice.
Diamonds are old as time, and so are many of the lessons, even if you aren't getting down on one knee to make the sale of a lifetime. Run the Numbers is a mostly media production. Yelling and intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by Meg D'Alessandro. Show is executive produced by Ben Hillman. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog way too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses. LOL. If you like this podcast, hit subscribe and give us 5 stars. It will take like 2 seconds and our algorithm overlords love it. Drink water, call your mom, and have a great day. Peace.